I never thought my career would unravel over a safety checklist. After 17 years at Westlake Chemical, I'd climbed from entry-level operator to shift supervisor, responsible for 32 people and millions in equipment. The plant was my second home, with its familiar symphony of hissing pipes and churning reactors that I could interpret like a language. Change came with Marcus, our new operations director. Fresh from headquarters with his MBA and slick presentations about efficiency optimization. The first time we met, he barely glanced at my maintenance records before announcing that our safety protocols were outdated and excessive. "These double checks are redundant," he said, flipping through my logbook. "We're losing 90 minutes per shift on procedures that modern systems have rendered unnecessary." I tried explaining that our perfect safety record wasn't accidental. Some of these tanks contain chemicals that don't play nice together. The automated systems are good, but they've failed before. Marcus smiled the way people do when they're not really listening. "I appreciate your commitment, James, but these manual inspections are costing us nearly $500,000 annually. The executive team expects us to modernize." The revised protocols arrived by email a week later. Manual inspections reduced by 60%. Maintenance intervals extended. Single-person verification for valve configurations that had always required 2 sets of eyes. My stomach knotted as I read through each change. That night at home, Lisa noticed something was wrong when I barely touched my dinner. After 16 years of marriage, she could read me like those safety gauges. "Talk to me," she said, sitting beside me on our porch swing. The evening air carried the distant scent of the plant, a chemical edge that most people found unpleasant but had become oddly comforting to me. "They're gutting our safety system," I told her. "This new guy doesn't understand what we're handling. It's not like making widgets. We've got reactions that can go critical if mismanaged. Can you refuse to implement the changes?" I laughed without humor. "And lose my job? We've got Morgan's college tuition coming up and your mom's medical bills. Your crews respect you. If you explain the risks, it won't matter. This is coming from corporate. They see numbers, not people." I spent the weekend revising the new protocols, adding back critical checks wherever I could justify them, documenting each addition with incident reports from our history. By Monday morning, I had a thick folder of amendments ready for Marcus. He thumbed through it for less than a minute before sliding it back across his desk. "I admire your thoroughness, but the decision's been made. Implementation begins next Monday." I felt something hardening inside me. These aren't arbitrary procedures. They're written in experience and some in blood. "Look, James," he leaned forward. "I understand change is difficult, but either you're on board with moving this plant into the modern era, or perhaps it's time to consider whether you're still the right fit for this position." The threat hung between us. I thought about my team, about what would happen if I left them under someone willing to blindly follow Marcus's protocols. I thought about my family and our obligations, and I made a choice I would later question every day. "I'll implement the new procedures," I said quietly, "but I want my objections on record." "Of course," Marcus replied with that same corporate smile. "I value your input." Walking back to my station, the familiar corridors felt suddenly foreign. For the first time in 17 years, I felt like an imposter in my own plant. I'd always believed that doing the right thing and doing what's necessary were the same. Now I wasn't so sure. The morning we implemented Marcus's new protocols, I arrived 2 hours early. Dawn hadn't yet broken as I walked the plant floor alone, performing the full checklist one last time. The old way, my way. Each valve, gauge, and pressure reading reassured me that at least I was handing over a perfectly tuned operation. Ray, my most experienced operator, found me in the control room reviewing the startup sequence. His weathered face creased with concern as I explained the changes. "This is insane," he muttered, tapping the laminated sheet. "Bypassing the secondary containment checks? Eliminating the cross-compatibility verifications before mixing batches?" "I know, Ray." My voice sounded hollow, even to myself. "I fought it." "Not hard enough," he said, then immediately raised his hands. "Sorry, that's not fair. But James, you know as well as I do." "I do know. That's why I need you watching everything like a hawk. Document any anomaly, no matter how small." Ray nodded grimly. "The younger guys won't understand what we're risking. They haven't seen what can happen." By mid-morning, we'd gathered the entire shift in the conference room. I explained the new procedures, trying to sound confident while pointing out areas requiring special vigilance. Some of the veterans exchanged uneasy glances. The newer operators seemed relieved about the reduced paperwork. Elena, a chemical engineer who joined us last year, raised her hand. If these checks are redundant, why weren't they eliminated years ago? Surely the safety committee would have identified unnecessary steps. The question hung in the air. I could feel Ray and the other veterans watching me, waiting to see if I'd tell the unvarnished truth or parrot the company line. The new protocols reflect management's assessment of acceptable risk versus operational efficiency, I said carefully. Our job is to implement them while remaining attentive to any issues that arise. I watched something shift in Elena's expression. Disappointment, perhaps respect lost. It stung more than I'd expected. The first week under the new system went smoothly enough. We saved time, certainly. Crews finished their rounds faster. Paperwork decreased dramatically. Marcus visited twice, beaming at the efficiency metrics already improving on his dashboard. He clapped my shoulder like we were old friends who'd accomplished something meaningful together. See? Sometimes we need to let go of outdated habits to move forward, he said. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. By the third week, complacency had begun setting in. The corners we'd been cutting no longer felt like exceptions, but the new normal. Even Ray had stopped performing the unofficial extra checks I'd asked him to maintain. When I questioned him about it, he just shrugged. What's the point? If something happens, it's on them, not us. We're following approved procedures. That attitude terrified me more than any technical change. The culture that had kept us safe for decades was eroding faster than I'd anticipated. Then came the first incident. Nothing catastrophic, a minor pressure spike in one of the secondary reactors, quickly corrected by the automated systems. Under our old protocols, we would have caught the imbalance during a manual check before it triggered any alarms. I documented everything and sent a detailed report to Marcus, highlighting that this exact scenario had been covered by one of the eliminated safety checks. His response was a brief email. System performed as designed. No remedial action required. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced our kitchen at 3 a.m., reviewing the incident in my mind while Lisa watched me with worried eyes. You need to decide what matters more, she said finally. Your job or your conscience? It's not that simple, I replied. If I push too hard, they'll replace me with someone who won't push at all. At least this way I can watch for problems, try to prevent anything serious. She took my hands in hers. James, I've never seen you like this. You're not eating, not sleeping. Is any job worth what this is doing to you? I didn't have an answer, at least not one I wanted to face. Because the truth was, I'd become complicit in a system I believed was dangerous, telling myself I was the last line of defense. But with each passing day, that justification rang increasingly hollow. 6 weeks into the new protocols, the warning signs became impossible to ignore. Small disruptions occurred with increasing frequency: valve fluctuations, unexpected pressure variations, temperature inconsistencies. None critical on their own, but together they painted a picture that kept me awake at night. The plant was drifting toward instability, degree by subtle degree. I compiled a detailed analysis, charting each incident against our previous maintenance schedule. The correlation was undeniable. Nearly every problem occurred in systems where we'd reduced inspections or extended maintenance intervals. Before presenting my findings to Marcus, I sought out Elena. Despite our disagreement during the initial rollout, she'd proven herself meticulous and analytical. Exactly what I needed. I'm not asking you to take sides, I told her, as we reviewed the data in an empty lab after hours. Just verify my methodology. Tell me if I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. She studied the charts silently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Finally, she looked up with a gravity that validated my worst fears. The data supports your concerns, she said. These aren't isolated incidents, they're systemic warnings. If the trend continues. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Would you be willing to co-sign my report? I asked. Elena hesitated, twisting a pen between her fingers. I have a performance review next month. This wouldn't exactly ingratiate me with management. I understand, I said, trying to mask my disappointment. But, she continued, straightening her shoulders, I didn't become an engineer to play politics. I'll sign it. The meeting with Marcus went worse than I'd anticipated. He barely glanced at our carefully prepared presentation before dismissing it. Correlation isn't causation, James. These are routine fluctuations well within operational parameters. The frequency is increasing, I countered. And the pattern clearly— The pattern, he interrupted, is that you've been resistant to these changes from day one. Perhaps you're finding problems because you're looking for them. Elena spoke up. Sir, with respect, the data is objective. These incidents— Thank you for your input, Elena. Marcus cut her off. But as someone still in her probationary period, perhaps focus on mastering current protocols before questioning them. I watched her face flush with anger and humiliation. My own anger surged, hot and immediate. That's completely inappropriate, I said, my voice low but firm. Elena's analysis is sound. Dismissing it, and her, doesn't change the facts. Marcus leaned back, his expression hardening. The facts are that productivity is up 15% and costs are down. Your old system was built on excessive caution that this company can no longer afford. Until something fails catastrophically, I pressed. Then what will it cost? This conversation is becoming unproductive. He stood abruptly. Continue implementing the approved protocols. Consider this matter closed. After he left, Elena and I sat in stunned silence. I'm sorry, I finally said. I shouldn't have involved you. She shook her head. No, you were right to bring this forward. And now we have documentation. If anything happens, they can't say they weren't warned. The word when hung unspoken between us. That evening, I drove home along the river road, passing neighborhoods where many of our workers lived with their families. The plant's floodlights were visible in the distance, a constellation of artificial stars against the darkening sky. I thought about the invisible threads connecting that facility to these homes, how livelihoods depended on the plant running, but lives depended on it running safely. Lisa was waiting on the porch, a glass of wine in hand and another set out for me. One look at my face told her everything. They rejected your report, she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, sinking into the chair beside her. Completely. And Marcus essentially threatened Elena's position for supporting me. What are you going to do? I took a long swallow of wine, letting the question settle. For weeks I'd been trying to work within the system, following the rules while documenting the risks. But today had made one thing abundantly clear. Marcus and his corporate backers weren't interested in evidence that contradicted their efficiency narrative. I think I need to go outside the normal channels, I said finally. The regional safety inspector owes me a favor from when I helped with that investigation at the Eastbrook facility. Lisa's eyes widened slightly. You'd report your own plant? They'd know it was you, James. Maybe. Or maybe an anonymous tip with enough specific information would trigger a mandatory inspection. And if they still find you out? I turned the wine glass in my hands, watching the liquid catch the porch light. Then I'll deal with those consequences. But I can't keep doing this, pretending everything's fine while watching us inch closer to disaster. Something shifted inside me as I said those words aloud, a weight lifting even as a new burden settled in its place. For the first time in weeks, I felt clear-headed. I've spent my career preventing accidents, I said quietly. I'm not going to start causing them now just because someone changed the definition of safe. The call to the regional safety inspector was simultaneously the hardest and easiest decision I'd made in my professional life. Mike Donovan had been in the industry longer than I had, with a reputation for integrity that even corporate executives respected, or at least feared. I need to keep this conversation confidential, I said after exchanging brief pleasantries. Always, Mike replied, his voice immediately shifting to a more guarded tone. What's going on at Westlake? I laid out the situation methodically. The protocol changes, the increasing incidents, management's dismissal of our concerns. Mike listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification on technical details. Look, James, I can't launch a full inspection based on a confidential tip alone, he said when I finished, but I can schedule a routine safety review. It won't be comprehensive, but it'll let me get eyes on the areas you're most concerned about. When? Give me 2 weeks. And James, be careful. I've seen how companies handle people they consider troublemakers, even when those people are trying to prevent disasters. The following Monday, I noticed Marcus and the plant manager, David Colber, in an unusually long closed-door meeting. When David emerged alone, his normally affable expression was strained. He headed straight to my station. "James, got a minute?" We walked to a quiet corner of the control room. David had been my first supervisor when I joined Westlake. He'd supported my promotions over the years. Now he looked uncomfortable, almost apologetic. "Corporate's doing a performance audit of all supervisory staff," he said. "They're starting with you." The implications were clear. "That's an interesting coincidence." David winced. "Marcus seems to think you're undermining the new systems rather than supporting them. Says your teams are reporting confusion about expectations." "My teams are doing exactly what they've been instructed to do," I replied evenly, "while documenting the results as required by our safety certifications. David lowered his voice. "Just ease up on the documentation. You've made your concerns known. Now it's time to be a team player." The phrase hit me like a physical blow. 17 years of loyal service reduced to a question of whether I was a team player. Is keeping people safe not part of being on the team anymore? David sighed. "You know what I mean. Look, I'm trying to give you a friendly heads up here. Marcus has the executive committee's ear. This efficiency initiative is showing early results they like. Don't make yourself the obstacle they need to remove." I thanked him for the warning, but as he walked away, a cold certainty settled in my gut. The company I'd given nearly 2 decades to was no longer the company I thought I worked for. 3 days later, as I supervised the restart of our primary reactor after scheduled maintenance, alarms blared from monitoring station 4. I rushed over to find Elena and 2 operators staring at a pressure gauge climbing into the red zone. "Coolant systems not responding," Elena reported tersely. "We're seeing rapid temperature increases in sections 3 through 5. I checked the automated override. It should have activated already. The display showed green, indicating normal operation, but the physical gauge told a different story. "The system thinks everything's fine," I muttered. "Sensor failure." "Manual override?" Elena asked. "Immediately. Full coolant flush to all affected sections." I grabbed the radio. "Ray, initiate emergency coolant protocol for the main reactor, sections 3 through 5. "That's not standard procedure for this alert level," one of the younger operators objected. "The alert level is wrong," I snapped. "The system's misreading the sensors." Within minutes, Ray had the manual coolant flowing. The temperature began to stabilize, then gradually decrease. Crisis averted. Barely. Later, as Elena and I analyzed what had happened, the picture became clear. One of the inspection points eliminated in the new protocols would have caught the degrading sensor before it failed completely. The automated system, receiving no data indicating a problem, had continued normal operations while the reactor overheated. "We got lucky," Elena said, her face pale. "If we hadn't had experienced operators who noticed the physical gauges..." I didn't need her to finish the thought. We both knew the potential consequences. I documented everything, attached the sensor maintenance history that showed it was 2 weeks overdue for inspection under our old protocols, and sent the report directly to David, Marcus, and the corporate safety office. My hand hovered over the keyboard before adding Mike Donovan to the recipient list as well. No more playing it safe. Marcus was in my office within an hour, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing copying the regulatory inspector on an internal incident report? Following federally mandated reporting requirements for near-miss incidents involving critical safety systems," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline still coursing through me. "This was a minor equipment issue that your team handled appropriately. Nothing more." I leaned forward. "We got lucky today. The next time a sensor fails because we've stretched maintenance intervals too thin, we might not have someone like Ray who knows to check the physical gauges when something feels off. You're catastrophizing to justify your resistance to change. And you're minimizing to justify cost-cutting that's putting lives at risk." We stared at each other across my desk, the professional veneer between us finally stripped away. "The safety inspection scheduled for next week," he said slowly. "You arranged it, didn't you?" I didn't answer, which was answer enough. Marcus nodded as if confirming something to himself. "I tried to work with you, James. Remember that." After he left, I sat motionless, my mind racing through potential next steps. The implied threat in Marcus's parting words was unmistakable. Whatever was coming, I had little time to prepare. The email arrived at 7:13 the next morning, before I'd even reached the plant. Subject line: Performance Review Meeting, Urgent. The message itself was brief. My presence was required in the executive conference room at 9 a.m. The sender was not Marcus or David, but Heather Wilson from corporate HR. I forwarded it to my personal email and called Lisa. "It's happening," I told her, watching the traffic crawl forward. The morning sun glinted off the plant's storage tanks in the distance. "They're moving faster than I expected. Are you surprised?" Her voice was calm, steadying. "What's your plan?" "I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to record the meeting if I can." "Be careful, James. Some states have laws about recording without consent." "I'll check. But I need evidence of what's said. This isn't just about my job anymore." I spent the next hour in my car in the plant parking lot, researching recording laws and preparing myself for what was coming. I reviewed the incident reports I'd filed, the correspondence with Marcus, the documentation of protocol changes. Then I texted Ray and Elena. "Possible situation developing. If anything happens to me today, trust your training, not the new protocols." At precisely 9:01 a.m. I entered the conference room to find Marcus, David, and Heather seated on one side of the table. A fourth person, a man I didn't recognize in an expensive suit, sat slightly apart, a leather portfolio open before him. "James, thank you for joining us," Heather began with corporate politeness that didn't reach her eyes. "This is Richard Keller from legal." My stomach tightened. They'd brought legal to a performance review. This was worse than I'd anticipated. "We've been reviewing your recent performance and have significant concerns," Heather continued. "There's a pattern of resistance to approved operational changes, undermining of management directives, and creation of confusion among staff." I remained silent, watching them carefully. "Most seriously," Marcus added, "you've made unsubstantiated claims about safety issues and contacted regulatory authorities without following proper channels." "I followed every procedure in the safety manual," I replied evenly, "which I helped write 5 years ago." "That manual has been superseded," Marcus said dismissively. "Federal reporting requirements haven't." Richard Keller cleared his throat. "Mr. Reeves, we're not here to debate regulatory interpretation. We're here because your actions have become disruptive to operations." David looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "Let me be direct," Heather interjected. "We're prepared to offer you a separation package." She slid a folder across the table. 6 months' salary, continued health benefits through the end of the year, and a neutral reference in exchange for your immediate resignation and signing of a non-disclosure agreement. I didn't touch the folder. "And if I decline?" "Then we proceed with a performance improvement plan," Marcus said. "With clear metrics you'll need to meet within 30 days. "Metrics like what? Ignoring safety concerns? Pretending sensors aren't failing? Like demonstrating your commitment to the operational changes this company has implemented," Marcus replied coldly. "Changes that have been approved at the highest levels." The implication was crystal clear. Take the money and leave quietly, or be fired for cause after a month of documented failure to improve. "I need time to consider the offer," I said. "You have until tomorrow morning," Heather replied. "We'll need your decision by 9 a.m. I stood to leave, then paused. "Yesterday's incident with the reactor cooling system. Has that been reported to OSHA yet?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "That incident has been classified as a minor equipment malfunction, not a reportable safety event." "Then we have different interpretations of the regulations," I said quietly. "And that's the real problem here, isn't it?" Outside, I found Elena waiting near my office, her expression anxious. "What happened?" she asked, following me inside and closing the door. I gave her the abbreviated version, watching her face shift from concern to anger. "They can't do this," she said when I finished. "It's textbook retaliation. They're being careful, offering a generous package documenting performance issues. Nothing explicitly connected to the safety reports." Elena paced the small office. "The inspection is still happening next week. If Donovan finds what we know he'll find, I might not be here by then," I interrupted. "And Marcus knows exactly which systems to make look good for a one-day inspection." She stopped pacing. "Then we need to make sure Donovan sees everything, not just what they show him." "That's a big risk for you to take," I warned. "Your career." My career won't mean much if I have to live with knowing I could have prevented something terrible. Her voice was firm. I became an engineer to build things that help people, not to hide problems that could hurt them. Her words struck a chord, reminding me of my own younger self, the idealist who'd entered this industry believing in the importance of doing things right, not just doing them profitably. That evening, I spread the separation agreement across our kitchen table while Lisa read over my shoulder. 6 months' salary was substantial, enough to keep us afloat while I found another position. The non-disclosure provisions, however, were expansive. This would prevent you from discussing safety concerns with anyone, Lisa noted, pointing to a particularly broad clause. Including regulators. That's the point. They're buying my silence. She sat across from me, her eyes serious. What do you want to do, James? Not what's practical or what's strategic. What do you actually want? I considered the question. Really considered it. Perhaps for the first time since this ordeal began. The answer emerged with unexpected clarity. I want to fix the problem, I said slowly. Not just wash my hands of it. If I leave, they'll replace me with someone who won't question anything. The issues will get worse. Eventually, I didn't need to finish. We both understood the potential consequences of continued neglect in a chemical plant of Westlake's size and proximity to residential areas. Then you know what you have to do, Lisa said, reaching across the table to take my hand. And I'll support you, whatever comes next. I nodded, a plan forming. I need to make some calls. My first call was to Mike Donovan. They've offered me a separation package, I told him without preamble, with an NDA that would prevent me from discussing safety concerns with anyone. Jesus, he muttered. That's aggressive. When do you need to decide? Tomorrow morning, but I'm not signing. I'm going to document everything and deliver it all to you personally before they can escort me out. James, Mike's voice turned cautious. I understand your position, but legally speaking, I know the whistleblower statutes, I interrupted. I've already consulted with an attorney. This wasn't entirely true. I had an appointment scheduled for first thing in the morning, but time was too short for niceties. All right, if you're sure about this path, I'll expedite the inspection. Day after tomorrow, not next week. They'll be prepared for you, I warned. They know exactly which systems to showcase and which to hide. Let me worry about that. Just get me your documentation. My second call was to Ray, asking him to meet me early the next morning before my deadline with HR. He agreed without question. His loyalty something I'd come to rely on more than I'd realized. I spent the night compiling everything. Incident reports, maintenance logs, correspondence, the old protocols alongside the new ones with critical differences highlighted. By dawn, I had 3 copies. One for Mike, one for my attorney, and one securely stored in the cloud where no corporate IT purge could reach it. Ray was waiting in the empty break room when I arrived, his weathered face lined with concern. They're pushing you out, aren't they? He asked. Trying to, I confirmed, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. I need you to hold on to this. If anything happens before Mike Donovan's inspection tomorrow, give it to him directly. Ray tucked the envelope into his jacket without looking at it. What are you going to do? Refuse their offer. Force them to either back down or fire me outright. They'll fire you, Ray said flatly. Marcus isn't the type to back down. Probably, but a wrongful termination claim looks better than quietly accepting hush money. Ray studied me for a moment. You know, when they first brought in all these fancy new systems, I thought maybe I was just being an old dinosaur, resistant to change. But watching you fight this, it makes me think maybe some things shouldn't change. The technology isn't the problem, I said. It's the people who think technology eliminates the need for human judgment. At precisely 9:00 a.m., I walked into Heather Wilson's temporary office without the signed agreement. Her professional smile faltered when she noticed my empty hands. I can't accept the offer, I said simply. She sighed, not surprised. Marcus thought you might say that. He asked to speak with you himself if that was your decision. Minutes later, I sat across from Marcus in the same conference room as yesterday. This time we were alone. This isn't personal, he began, his tone suddenly conciliatory. I respect your commitment to what you believe is right, but you disagree about what's right. I disagree with your risk assessment, he corrected. Every system has theoretical failure points. We've determined the probability doesn't justify the operational cost of your preferred safeguards. And when theory becomes reality? When sensors fail because we've stretched maintenance too thin? Then we address those specific issues as they arise, rather than maintaining excessive protocols indefinitely. I leaned forward. That's the fundamental difference between us, Marcus. I believe in preventing disasters. You believe in managing acceptable losses. Something flickered across his face. Anger, perhaps, or recognition. You've put me in a difficult position, he said finally. Your separation package was generous, more than fair. I'm not interested in being paid to look the other way. No, he said, almost to himself. I can see that now. He pressed a button on his phone. Heather, please come in with the termination paperwork. And just like that, 17 years of service ended with a signature, not on an NDA, but on an acknowledgement that I'd been terminated for failure to adequately support operational directives. The security escort waiting to watch me clean out my desk felt like unnecessary theater, but I complied without protest. Word traveled fast. As I walked through the plant for the last time, operators and technicians found reasons to cross my path, exchanging quick nods or brief handshakes. No one spoke openly, too risky with security present, but the silent support was palpable. Elena caught up to me near the exit, ostensibly to return a manual she'd borrowed. Donovan's inspection is still on for tomorrow, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I've prepared everything we discussed. I nodded slightly, aware of the security guard watching us. Be careful, I murmured. Outside, standing in the parking lot with a cardboard box containing 17 years of professional life, I felt oddly unburdened. The sky seemed clearer, the air fresher, despite the familiar chemical scent that still clung to my clothes. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Whatever happened, I'm proud of you. I drove directly to the attorney's office, where I spent 3 hours detailing everything that had transpired. Patricia Reingold listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, her expression growing increasingly grave. You've got a solid whistleblower case, she concluded, but these things are never quick or easy. The company will fight back hard. I understand. On the upside, with the safety inspection happening tomorrow, we may have additional leverage if violations are found. I nodded, though my thoughts were elsewhere, with Ray, Elena, and the others still inside those walls, still working with systems I no longer trusted. That night, sleep eluded me. Lisa found me on our back porch at 2 a.m., staring at the distant glow of the plant against the night sky. Second thoughts, she asked, wrapping a blanket around both our shoulders. Not about the decision, I replied. Just worried about what happens next. For the plant, for the people still there. You've done everything you could. Sometimes that has to be enough. I wasn't sure I believed that, but I leaned into her warmth anyway, grateful for the certainty of her support amid so much uncertainty. The call from Mike Donovan came the following afternoon. We're shutting them down, he said without preamble. Effective immediately. My heart stuttered. The whole plant? Temporarily. We found multiple critical violations that require immediate correction before operations can safely continue. How bad? Bad enough that I've already briefed my superiors and the regional director. This goes beyond the usual citations. They're looking at significant penalties. Relief and vindication washed through me, tempered by concern for the short-term impact on workers. The employees will continue to receive pay during the shutdown, Mike assured me. That's non-negotiable. And James, you should know your documentation was crucial. Elena showed us exactly where to look, but your records gave us the historical context to understand the severity. After we hung up, I sat motionless, absorbing the implications. The plant where I'd spent my entire career was shuttered, if only temporarily. The systems I'd helped build and maintain for nearly 2 decades had been officially deemed unsafe. It was not a victory I'd wanted, but perhaps it was the one that was needed. The news broke quickly. By evening, local stations were reporting on the emergency shutdown of Westlake Chemical following a regulatory inspection. Corporate issued a terse statement about temporary suspension of operations to address maintenance concerns while prioritizing employee and community safety. No mention of the systematic dismantling of crucial safety protocols that had necessitated the shutdown. My phone lit up with messages from former colleagues, some supportive, others angry about the uncertainty the closure created. I answered what I could, deflected what I couldn't. The truth would emerge eventually. 3 days later, the company called an all-employee meeting at the local union hall. I wasn't invited, of course, but Ray texted me throughout. Corporate VP here. Looks nervous. Announcing minimum 3-week shutdown for critical system upgrades. Just confirmed everyone keeps full pay and benefits during shutdown. Marcus nowhere to be seen. The last message made me pause. Marcus's absence spoke volumes. In corporate culture, not being present for crisis management usually meant one thing. You were no longer managing anything. Patricia called the following morning. "I just got off the phone with Westlake's attorneys," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "They want to discuss settlement terms." "Already? We haven't even filed anything yet." "They know what's coming. The regulatory violations give us significant leverage." I considered this. "What kind of terms?" "They're starting with reinstatement at your previous position with back pay, plus a confidentiality agreement about the settlement discussions." "No," I said immediately. "I won't sign anything that prevents me from discussing the safety issues." "I anticipated that," Patricia replied. "I've already conveyed that any agreement must exclude the safety protocols from confidentiality provisions. They're considering it." Another call came that afternoon, this one unexpected. David Colbert sounding exhausted. "James," he began awkwardly, "I'm not sure if you're even willing to talk to me after everything, but I thought you should hear this directly." "I'm listening." "Marcus has been removed, effective immediately." David paused. "Corporate is citing management decisions that created unnecessary operational risk." The corporate speak translation wasn't hard to decipher. Marcus had become the sacrifice to protect those above him. "What about you?" I asked. "I've been asked to oversee the compliance upgrades and reopening," he said, "and to rebuild the safety protocols." Another pause. "I told them I'd only do it if I could bring you back as a consultant." The request caught me off guard. "What did they say?" "They're considering it. The regulatory fines are already in the millions, with more likely coming. Having you visibly involved in the fix would help their case." I didn't answer immediately, unsure how to feel about being offered a role in repairing what should never have been broken. "Think about it," David urged. "This isn't just about making nice with regulators. We need to get this right for everyone's sake." After he hung up, I walked the neighborhood, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also lingering anger, uncertainty about returning to a place that had pushed me out, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. Lisa found me sitting on a park bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in oranges and purples that reminded me, ironically, of some of the chemical reactions I'd monitored for years. "David wants me back as a consultant," I told her, "to help rebuild the safety systems." She sat beside me. "How do you feel about that?" Conflicted. "It feels like they're only reaching out because they're in trouble, not because they actually value what I was trying to tell them." "Probably," she agreed. "But does the motivation matter if the outcome is right?" I considered her question as darkness crept across the park. "I'm not sure I can trust them again. Any of them." "Then don't," she said simply. "Trust yourself. Go in with your eyes open, do what you know is right, and make them put everything in writing." 2 weeks into the shutdown, I accepted a 6-month consulting contract with strict terms. Complete autonomy over safety protocol redesign, direct reporting to the corporate compliance officer rather than plant management, and no confidentiality restrictions regarding past safety issues. To my surprise, they agreed to everything. My first day back at Westlake felt surreal. The normally bustling plant stood silent. Work crews focused on inspections and repairs rather than production. Elena met me at the security desk, her professional demeanor briefly giving way to a quick, fierce hug. "They're actually listening now," she told me as we walked to the temporary office they'd set up for me. "It's like a different company. Fear of regulatory penalties will do that," I replied dryly. "The question is whether it lasts. That's why we're documenting everything," she said. "Every inspection, every repair, every protocol revision. It's all going into the system with redundant backups." In the following weeks, I worked 14-hour days alongside Elena, Ray, and a team of engineers brought in from corporate. We dismantled Marcus's efficiency measures one by one. reinstating critical checks while implementing new automated systems that enhanced rather than replaced human oversight. We revamped maintenance schedules, redesigned alarm systems, and created reporting structures that couldn't be easily circumvented. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying. This wasn't just about returning to the old ways, it was about building something better, something that balanced operational needs with uncompromising safety standards. A month into the project, I received an unexpected visitor. Thomas Reardon, Westlake's CEO, appeared in my temporary office doorway one afternoon. "Mr. Reeves," he said, extending his hand, "I owe you an apology." I stood slowly, sizing up the man whose vision had ultimately driven the changes that had put so many at risk. For what specifically? He didn't flinch at the directness. For creating a culture where financial metrics were prioritized over sound operational judgment. For not listening when concerns were raised. He gestured at the stacks of documentation surrounding us. For necessitating all of this. The apology seemed genuine, but I'd grown wary of corporate sincerity. What happens when the regulatory spotlight fades, Mr. Reardon? When shareholders start pushing for better margins again? A fair question, he acknowledged. Which is why we're implementing structural changes. He handed me a folder. We're creating a new position, corporate safety advocate, with direct reporting to the board's risk committee. Someone with the authority to override operational decisions if safety is compromised. I skimmed the job description. And who will fill this role? That's why I'm here, Reardon said. We'd like to offer it to you. The irony wasn't lost on me. Being offered a position created to address problems I'd been fired for raising. Yet beneath my skepticism, I recognized the opportunity. A chance to institutionalize the changes we were making, to protect them from future cost-cutting initiatives. I'll consider it, I said finally. But I'd need complete independence. Real authority, not just a title to make regulators happy. Read the full proposal, Reardon suggested. I think you'll find we've anticipated most of your concerns. After he left, I sat with the folder open before me, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me here, from loyal employee to whistleblower to potential executive. None of it had been planned, yet somehow it felt like the culmination of everything I'd fought for. That evening, I discussed the offer with Lisa on our porch, our conversation punctuated by the distant sounds of repair work continuing through the night at the plant. They're serious about this, I told her. The position has actual teeth. Budget authority, direct board access, veto power over operational changes that impact safety systems. Do you trust them to honor it? She asked. Not implicitly, I admitted. But the regulatory spotlight isn't fading anytime soon. And with everything documented and the right structures in place, Lisa smiled. You want to take it? I think I do, I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. Not because I trust the company, but because someone needs to be in that role who understands what happens when safety becomes negotiable. That's why they want you, she pointed out. You've proven you'll stand your ground even when it costs you. I nodded, looking toward the plant, the place that had defined so much of my professional life. A relationship now transformed, but not ended. The strangest part, I said finally, is that in trying to silence me, they ended up giving me a much louder voice. Lisa took my hand. Use it well,